hi, and welcome to the Afromavericks. My name is Abathembu Royal, and this is my Jamie.
How you doing?
And we're back in this room, like here. Yeah, when we in here, it's highly likely because our producer's not here. That's why. And then we need to put everything together ourselves
in a compact place.
Yes.
So today we're flying solo.
Yebo. So we're not gonna discuss coronavirus because one, we're not medical professionals,
but
right?
two, a lot keeps changing.
Yes, and also there's so much information, and if we put this out, and already the number of
the
people
information could change.
Exactly. And number two, because we discussed it a little bit.
Yeah. Also, I think Corona has absorbed a lot of the oxygen conversationally, but a lot of things happened in the previous week, and those things are worth discussing. And they could fall away, and they actually are significant and they're worth discussing. So
exactly.
let's try go and look at the other big news besides the big COVID.
Okay, so we're discussing King Dalingebo or Dalingebo.
Dalingebo.
It's Dalingebo's.
Dalingebo. It's fine.
I feel like this is deja vu, like a Mura.
Yes, this is Mura, but in reverse.
Yeah, in reverse. So King Dalingebo's arrest, and we're also going to discuss Vodacom slashing his prices by 30%. We're also going to discuss the university protests that are going on in the country.
Yeah, so a lot of stuff happened in the universities. So let's start with the university situation. So we saw a variety of things affecting the fees must fall movement, and one of which was the conviction of Mcebo Dlamini earlier in the week. He admitted guilt, and the sentence I think was 2.5 years, suspended 4 or 5 years. I think for me, the sentence seemed to be a bit disproportionate because Mcebo didn't really do much. He took a policeman's shield and he wore a helmet, and he was basically involved in the theater of the protest, but I never saw Mcebo once break a window or do anything that was beyond the pale. So I felt that the sentence of Mcebo was the system cracking down once again on student activists, and activists who were not necessarily involved in acts which were of a very gratuitous nature.
The militancy of it.
Yeah, so some people who burnt cars, etc., those kind of students, I do think they need harsh sentences, although I think those harsh sentences must be moderated by the fact that the conditions under which the offense happened, the political nature of the offense, as well as trying to single out one person for collective actions is always tricky. But in the case of Mcebo, I thought that the sentence itself was overly harsh and had a chilling effect on basically student activism.
Yeah. Look, I want to say that I don't even think that any of these activists, although they burned things, should actually be convicted of anything, because essentially they're fighting for something that's bigger than us, and they're trying to rid of a system. It's like that said, look, your purpose as graduates is to rid of the system that is unjust, and it's different for everyone. Pre-1994, 1990, it was fighting the apartheid system, but the continuation of the fight right now is ensuring free, quality, decolonized education. And I think the fact
but don't you think there's a line somewhere? Do you think that burning buildings, for instance, should be sanctioned?
It should be, but my thing is this. In essence, and the intention is to correct a wrong or to ensure the emancipation of a group of people, or to ensure that they have access to this. It's a human right. Education is a human right. And so for us to punish them for it, for me, that seems to be a bit extreme. I understand, yes, burning things is wrong, but the intention and the reasoning why they're doing that is just too profound for me for them to be punished. But anyways, the entire thing for me, the protest, is speaking to the fact that the initial, I want to call it a revolution, or the initial movement of fees must fall did not necessarily achieve its mandate. And I'm talking about the wave of that it didn't necessarily achieve its mandate, and there was free, quality decolonized education. Education isn't free. I mean, President Jacob Zuma was on the podium and said, look, I announced free education for the poor, but then there was the missing middle, and I'm part of the missing middle, and that's why the fees must fall story is very personal for me, the movement as a whole, because the premise of it is my story. I've dropped out of varsity 3 different times because of fees. So it's a very personal situation. The second thing is that in terms of quality, I mean, UNISA had some changes in terms of its LLB curriculum because they were like, look, this is not really reflective of people who are employable, right? And they've been able to change that. But holistically, we can't speak of a truly quality education in the South African spectrum of education. And in terms of it being decolonized, there's still a long way to go. And that also speaks to the fact that, look, you can't change or decolonize a curriculum if in practice that system itself is not decolonized.
Look, I think to speak on the issue of have the goals of the Fees Must Fall movement been attained, it's very clear that they haven't been attained. It's also very clear that there's a lack of political will to push that. And that confuses me, because I think that the goals of free decolonized education are actually important. Number one, this is the human capital of the state. You know, in Germany, they like to say that if you create one graduate, that graduate creates 3 other jobs downstream. So it doesn't make sense to me when we say we want to grow the economy at over 7% to achieve the NDP targets by 2030, that we don't prioritize university access and support for students whilst they are in university. That includes accommodation, textbooks, and also psychological support, because there's a lot of emotional baggage people come with from high schools, from rough communities. And there's even studies at Harvard where students who came in with top SAT marks, who were coming from rough backgrounds, had less prospects of graduating than students who were coming from affluent backgrounds because of the support that they receive from home. So we have to look at students holistically. And that makes me think about the other story that came out around these people who were being called professional students by UKZN. So UKZN basically said, these 2,000 students, they're kicking them out because, they had to finish degrees in 3 years, and they were still at the university for 8 years. And for me, part of this is disbelief in students. So I think that there may be some students who are, not putting in the effort, not interested in academia at all. There has to be a way to find those students and remove them from the system. That's the caveat. So I want to first of all say, anybody who doesn't really want to be at varsity, they must go. But if there's somebody who's struggling, we need to find out why they're struggling and capacitate them to succeed. It may very well be that you've got somebody who's in engineering who needs to be in maths education. So let's transfer that student to somewhere where maybe they have stronger abilities. Let's capacitate students. Let's find out, before we kick you out, do you lack accommodation, textbooks? Do you have psychological trauma that you're going through? How can the university equip you? Because every child is a human resource to the nation. And I don't think we should be thinking about young people in this dismissive way where we write them off. It's problematic. And in fact, if you look at the history of the world, some of the most brilliant contributors to technology, for example, was Steve Jobs, were people who didn't necessarily complete the degree because there was a mismatch, right, between the talent of the student and where they were situated. Steve Jobs dropped out of formal university learning, but he was still going to a lot of classes. And for example, he went to calligraphy classes, and that's the reason why we have fonts in all of the Word or Pages or Google Doc, all of the typing software. Because Steve Jobs had an eye that there needs to be more than one font. So let's not be hasty to write students off, is basically my point. And that's something that came up, which I found troubling, the writing off of students.
So it's reflective of, it could be reflective of the socio-economic issues that need to be looked into.
Absolutely.
And number 2, I think just give them a certificate. If it's one of those people who are like, I'm not really interested in varsity, give them to show that there is some knowledge.
Let's convert them to TVET. Right? What credits can they get from the varsity to the TVET system? Let's just not say to kids, futzak. That's basically what my submission was. And I didn't think that the UK is in an approach. Look, it speaks to this almost racist sentiment. that black kids are just being let in and that they're not good enough, and we just need to get rid of all the bad blacks and then the system will improve. And I don't really think that we should give up on human potential without trying. I always say that I'm going to give up on my kids after having tried everything. And that's the standard that I think a state should apply, especially for kids who made it through a very rough matric system, living in the townships, under-resourced, no chairs, no whiteboards, no labs, and you still make it to varsity. We shouldn't just say, well, now that you're in the Premier League, any bad performance, you're out.
Alrighty, let's move it along before we get carried away, right?
For sure.
King Dalingebo.
Let's do vodacom. Let's do Dali last.
Are you gonna edit this out?
No, I'm leaving it in. I'm just saying. Let's because that's the sequence.
Okay, so Vodacom has slashed its prices by 30%. Right? What's your take on that?
So look, I've got two things that I think about Vodacom. Number one is that I'm happy that they are zero rating some of the services moving forward. So university students will be able to access some things without having to lose data as a result of that. I think that's progressive. I think that's good. My concern, however, is that the original fight was that we should have lifetime data. So if I buy a gig, it's mine forever. So after some moves, now we only have time-based data, which I found to be a way of sneaking around the issue by the providers. That now, instead of having this data which we can keep forever, we have to keep buying periodic data. That I have an issue with. Number two is that the data that Vodacom is reducing from 149 to 99 per gigabyte, it's already available as a special anyway for 1 month. You can get it if you navigate the app. They haven't made any commitments around reducing the weekly bundles, and which is the daily bundles and the weekly bundles is what a lot of people are using nowadays. You know, because it's 80 Rand for a gig if you are like looking at Vodacom for a week, and it's 29 Rand for a gig if you're using it in a day, and it's 12 Rand for a gig in an hour, right? Their reductions are still lower than the price of data that is offered by Vodacom in Mozambique. They're already below 100 rands in Mozambique as things stand. The very same Vodacom. So when you cross over to Mozambique, Vodacom will sell you data for way less than it's selling it at the reduced price that we'll be getting it in April. I have an issue with that because I find that it's still not speaking to the heart of the issue. It's still an overpricing of data by Vodacom in a market which is bigger, where they've got wider coverage and a wider customer base than they even do have in Mozambique. So that's really my take on that.
Yeah. Look, I think that this is a case of capitalism somewhat succumbing to the corrective measures. I think we're seeing, the competition commission saying, but look, your prices are too high, reduce them. And Vodacom, and now MTN is coming to the party. MTN was really like, they were like, oh, hell no.
MTN is coming last.
We're not doing this. But now seeing that, look, our biggest competitor is now succumbing to it, so we will kind of sort of follow as well. And they're doing 34% actually.
They may do up to 50. They say they're going to announce. They haven't yet announced.
So the speculation is around between. So it's very interesting to see that they have the capacity to actually succumb, and the fact that these organizations or entities that and therefore oversight purposes can pull that kind of muscle and actually to some point succeed. So I think, look, it's a bit of a win. It would be interesting to see if they can take it further and see holistically ensure
but this is where the challenge is, because in settling, the issue doesn't go to the competition court. It doesn't go to the higher courts, because there have been a lot of let's call them colluding practices that have been happening in the digital space. There isn't a real competition. It's like one agency will offer maybe free Twitter, but then the other one won't, and
then take it away.
And then take it away. But the competition hasn't really been like to give us the best pricing available. It's just like you can see almost like a benchmarking happening. If 1 gig is 80 Rand over here, it's going to be more or less 80 Rand over there for a week, etc., etc. So the Competition Commission does have teeth, and they are showing it a little bit. But when you settle, you compromise making the universal legal standard for this kind of a thing. And this is why Vodacom settled it, because it's better to settle than to have it settled in law.
So that'll be interesting to watch. However, let's move it along because time is not on our side.
Exactly.
King Dalingebo. has been arrested for the malicious damage of property and assault.
So he was released with a warning, though, after that.
I mean, this guy's a very interesting character, okay? He had a 15-year sentence for kidnapping, for arson, right? And it was reduced to 12 years. He turned himself in 2015, only to be released in 2019 because of this remission of sentence announced by the president for certain categories of prisoners. I think, look, this is a case of where President Ramaphosa is number one. It's a result of the danger of him trying to appease certain factions. The same reason that the Minister of Higher Education, Science and Technology, Bladen Zamande, is still a minister, A. And 2 is the Minister of Higher Education, right? Speaks to him appeasing the certain base, the SACP. He needs to appease them. It's a very political decision to do that. The same reason why he went to go see King Zwelithini and knelt in front of him when the conversation around the amendment of Section 25 of the Constitution is exactly that he will not touch the Ngonyama Trust. So it speaks to these political decisions that he's making in order to appease certain factions and bases, but it's not really working out. But also it speaks to a president who lacks conviction, right? Where is not necessarily his moral compass, but what are his issues?
But what would you have expected Cyril to do in this kind of a situation? Because this is unprecedented. Obviously, at some point, he was going to have to release the king because of the dynamics of our tribal history, and it would have just to keep the king under lock and key would have alienated a critical base within the Xhosa community.
That's exactly my point.
No, but I mean, so he had to do it. It's a real politic. It is what it is. But now I'm talking about the king is clearly fighting here for a return of the monarchy, because you've got Azanati Dalindyebo, who's acting as the king right now, and he doesn't look like he wants to relinquish, and it looks like some of the royal elders
these factionism even within that.
So when he went to the royal household, it looks like he was there to cause commotion right now. So he went in there to basically make gak, as that lady says. That's what he went in to do. And
with the machete, guys. I don't like a machete.
Yeah, he went in there with his panga, and apparently he was causing a lot of commotion, got some documents, or was trying to access some documents. And to be honest, traditionally you cannot have two kings. And the kingship issue has to be resolved. That's why the young man is still the acting king. And as a result of that, the traditional approach would be that the young king has to leave and go live in exile, so to speak, because it's an abomination to have two kings. So, but it looks like the factional battles are going to derail clarity in the royal home, because now you've got this factional side which is for the young man, and the factional side which is against him. Which is against him and for the old king. And unless this gets resolved, so this is where I think you may need to have national leadership, right? National leadership with respect from, is it the Abathembu, right? The respect from the Abathembu, with respect from the Xhosa community, to go in and try to discuss and resolve this issue in a way that brings back stability to the royal household, because this downstream could come back and hurt the ANC. Inaction, singling out the king, trying to side with the young man as opposed to the elder. This could cause a lot of commotion. So for me, I think the test then is, after all of this COVID stuff falls away, because that's absorbing all of the oxygen, right? How will this issue be resolved?
But also it just speaks to this man's character. He just keeps doing strange things. And my thinking right now is, how much more does national leadership or President Ramaphosa need to do? What's this man going to do next? What's he going to First he gets arrested for kidnapping, and now it's for other things and fighting for his rightful place, right? But It just he's a liability. His character is a liability.
I don't know the ethics of all of these kings, so I don't want to like weigh in on one without like knowing what else is happening. Because kings basically in this country are given a wide berth. And it looks like when the royal king of Abathembu got into trouble is when he started, taking positions which were not in line with the ANC. Remember, at some point, he joined the Democratic Alliance, and that's really where he lost, because for the longest time, there had been a conviction for the early 90s charges, but he had not been sentenced. So he was just operating in society with the pending sentencing. So when he got sentenced, that's when he got sent in, because basically the protection was removed, and then the ANC sent a message that, listen, chief, you can't...
And now they're stepping back in to be big brother, basically.
Yeah, but that's the relationship. Royal households have generally had a positive relationship with the ruling party, because that's how they secure their own, support from the state, etc., etc. So when Dalindyebo went off script, King Dalindyebo, that's when he started seeing some challenges. So
started seeing some flames.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because it does show us that the traditional life in South Africa still has a lot
of weight, a lot of muscle, a lot of power.
And significance.
Yeah. Especially in KZN. That's
Yeah.
No one is gonna trust that Ingwanyama trust nobody. No one. It's not gonna happen. But anyways, we love you guys, and we will see you next week.
Yeah, so like, comment, subscribe. We love having a conversation with you. It's the season where you have to social distance, or wash your hands, hand sanitizer, coffee to your elbow. Yeah, Miss Coco V's out here. Stay safe. We hope that this doesn't come into your household, into your circles, and that we'll have opportunities
wash
to
your hands
over and over again. It's underrated, but it works. Peace.